here. 1 second here. All right. All right, everybody. Welcome to the third keynote. Right after this, we're going to break this room down into 3 different tracks. Go get a lunch break and all that good stuff, and relax a little bit. And then we're going to kick off the rest of the talks here throughout the day and the night. So at DerbyCon, was it DerbyCon 1 or 2? I think it was 1.
It was 1. Yeah.
It was 1. DerbyCon 1, Kevin and I gave a talk about doing adaptive pen testing and what that really means, and kind of our model of how we go in and break into organizations and what we need to do to kind of move the industry forward to define what a pen test was, or to really look at the industry as a whole. And we had a lot of success that year, and it was a fun talk because we got to go into kind of some of our stories that we do and things like that. So this is kind of a culmination of different stories that we have. Can everybody hear me okay, by the way? Anybody not hear me? Jamie, you don't count. So this is just a culmination of a lot of different stories and techniques that we have, and just kind of our mentality when we go after systems. It's pretty fun. So a quick intro. I met Kevin. It's funny. When I first wrote the Social Engineer Toolkit, I'd come up with the Social Engineer Toolkit, and obviously I knew who Kevin was, and everything that happened in the past. And I wrote the Social Engineer Toolkit. And it was maybe like 6 months out when I first wrote it. And I get an email from someone from saying, hey, it was from Kevin Mitnick saying, hey, I really love your tool. It's awesome. I'm like, there's no way that's Kevin Mitnick. There's no way. Someone's messing with me because I just wrote this tool, and I'm all paranoid now, like looking out my window, and
it's a great tool.
I
love it.
Thank you. And it turned out to be Kevin, and we became really good friends. And he's just been, a wonderful person that I've known throughout the number of years that we've known each other. And he's just, one of the nicest guys that I know. And it's funny.
Thanks, Dave.
I like to tell the story of. Is it okay if I tell the Copperfield story?
Which one?
The Copperfield one.
Oh yeah, sure.
So we were in Vegas for DEF CON, and my wife and I went to go see David Copperfield, who, growing up, my dad took me, where's Dad at, Jim? He's back here? My dad took me to go see David Copperfield when I was like 8 years old. And so I got fascinated with magic and everything. I never could do any magic. I suck at it, but I can still do like the disappearing ball and things with my kids, and they're like, yeah, Kevin's actually really good at magic. So I sat down and I sat at this David Copperfield show, and it was kind of like reliving my childhood things, and I just happened to tweet, hey, I'm at David Copperfield. And I get a text message like 2 seconds later from Kevin saying, hey, you're at David Copperfield right now? And I'm like, yeah, why? He's like, he texts me back, he's like, just stay there after the show. I'm like, that's weird. I'm like, oh, whatever. So we stay after the show, and some guy comes up to us and says, like, hey, are you Dave Kennedy? I'm like, yeah. He's like, come on back, Copperfield to see you now. And we got to hang out with David Copperfield. I guess Kevin and Dave are good friends. So perks of knowing Kevin, I suppose. But I mean, that's the type of person he is, and who I've got to know. But I mean, he's the CEO at Mitnick Security Consulting. And someone that I work with on a regular basis. We partner together to do work, and someone that I really admire in the security industry. And this is just going to be a great presentation. Well, at least we hope everything goes well.
And I work with Dave. I mean, on a lot of projects we work together, and it's just great. We have a great working relationship. We have a great friendship, and it's just a pleasure to work with you.
You too, man.
Yeah.
You too. Dave. I always put Fox News up there because everybody makes fun of me when I'm on Fox News, so I always put my thing of Fox News on there.
We should have the Fox News thing back here.
Listen, I've been on other ones too, okay? I've been on other ones too. But I'm the CEO at TrustedSec. I started TrustedSec a few years ago. And just launching today, actually, at DerbyCon, I've been working for the past couple of years on an MSSP type model where, moving more so on the blue team, me being a hacker, understanding how I break in, building the defensive capabilities. So we just launched a sister company called Binary Defense Systems, which you can see hologram Dave out there. It's pretty creepy, huh? Kind of cool, though. You can see me petting the goat. Anyways. But I started that new company. That's the new endeavor that we're definitely working on. So TrustedSec and Binary Defense working together to both combat the offensive side and also on the defensive side, too. Been in front of Congress a few times and all that other good stuff, and created the Social Engineer Toolkit and yada, yada, yada. Special thanks to my dad. Without him, I wouldn't be here today. He always likes putting baby pictures in mine, so I figured I'd sideswipe him and put baby pictures himself in there beforehand, because he's speaking later on this weekend. So that's my dad when he was young in a bathtub. Yeah, look at that. Oh, yeah, I got some good ones. Yeah. Oh, yeah. You thought you were going to give me this year, didn't you? Ah, jeez. Well, this might have backfired a little bit. No idea why that's there, Dad. No idea why that's there. No idea. It's a pretty evil-looking bunny. Sorry, it's an inside joke. I'm still going to get spanked after this, but that's right. So we talk about this talk. We're going to get into the introduction of really what pen testing is to us and why it's important. I think if you look at kind of how we think, it can help you frame your mind to be a better pen tester, but also if you're not in the pen testing side, how we think in our mentality as attackers. Because obviously we're coming from a perspective of we're good, but we have to be bad for a little bit, right? And Kevin, you're good at being both of those, no offense, I mean. But obviously on the good side now. So as an attacker, it's important for us to figure out how to do different things. It's important for us to look at an organization and understand what we're attacking, right? Using a tool doesn't make you a pen tester. Now, I guess contrary to a lot of what's going out there, a vulnerability scanner doesn't equate to being a hacker, or a hacker doesn't equate to being a vulnerability scanner. The different purposes, they may augment you to help you, but we have to think differently in what we're doing in order to accomplish what we want to do. And that's really understanding, what problems we have in our organizations and how do you ultimately fix it. It's not about going after just domain admin.
Right, pretty much, when we're doing pen testing, we analyze the business and look at what the customer is doing, look at what relationships they have with other businesses. Like, for example, if it's in scope, we'll actually go after a partner business that might have an extranet between the two and go after the weakest link in the chain. In a lot of testing with financial institutions, and they're acquiring each other all the time, it's easier to go after the smaller financial institution, compromise them to get to the bigger one, as long, of course, as it's in scope of the contract. Right, so.
And so, talking about adaptive pen testing, the first thing I always like getting into is PowerShell, because it's one of my most favorite things and topics. And we're going to go through a bunch of different scenarios of how we break into companies. One of my personal favorites is PowerShell. And it pains me as a hacker when the company's still using Windows XP, because it's actually harder for me to hack Windows XP than it is to get Windows 7. And that's not because of any horrible things, just the addition to PowerShell makes it a lot easier for us to do different exploitation methods. And so, what I'm going to be demoing here in just a second is a tool that I wrote called Unicorn. And I have to give Matthew Graber all the world of credit for it, because he figured out how to do memory injection directly through PowerShell. And a couple of years ago at like DerbyCon 18 or something, we did a talk on PowerShell and how to get around execution restriction policies and a bunch of other stuff. But what this is good for us for is anytime you have any type of remote command execution, you have to fight things like antivirus and application whitelisting and stuff like that. In this case, what this tool does, and you can download it from GitHub and TrustedSec, is it literally generates just a copy and paste string, a blob that you can paste into a command prompt, and as long as they're running Windows Vista or above, or Server 2008 and above, and a lot of times Server 2003, they'll install PowerShell tools on there as well. It'll give you a shell directly into memory without touching disk, and you don't have to worry about things like antivirus or anything else. It also gets around application whitelisting, because why? PowerShell, right? PowerShell's whitelisted, running on that PowerShell process, so we don't have to worry about it. So this is a really quick demo on the PowerShell injection technique. And again, you can just get this from the GitHub on TrustedSec. And it's super, I went down to my roots and I did the whole ASCII art unicorn. Because why not? I mean, we got to go back to our roots, guys. I mean, we're hackers, right? I mean, what's a hacker tool without some ASCII art unicorns going in there? And all you do is run unicorn. And then whatever Metasploit payload you want. And then we'll do whatever IP. And you can do the reverse HTTPS, you can do a bind shell, you can do whatever you want to. And then as soon as you run it, it's going to automatically generate the code. It's going to embed your IP address and everything into it. The shell code's going to get generated. It's going to cast it Unicode, base64 encode it, and then it's going to export two files. You get PowerShell_attack.txt and unicorn.rc. Unicorn.rc is just a resource file for Metasploit, so if you just want to create your listener, you just do a -r and it runs it for you. I want to show you what this code looks like real quick. That's it right there. So you copy and paste that into whatever you have. Like, let's just say you're using, like you get a SQL injection flaw and you get access to the XP command shell store procedure. You can just copy and paste that into your XP command shell store procedure and you get a shell coming back at you. So it's literally that easy, and it allows you to do a lot of different techniques that we use, and it's really effective because I haven't seen anything really detecting it up to this point here, which is nice. So that's a unicorn attack. Also, I use this all the time when I'm on a pen test, and everybody uses the psexec command module, right? So you can, instead of using psexec, which creates a service and uploads a binary and gets picked up by everything, in this case, it just executes a command on the system. So you can just hit set command and then copy and paste that PowerShell command, and it supports our hosts, which means you can spray the whole network with it. So you spray the whole network with your credentials, and now you just have 1 million shells raining back in PowerShell for you. So it works out beautiful. So a lot of different techniques to use when you're doing those type of ones. It's awesome.
Oh yeah, when I remember we were working on a recent pen test, and we're using PS exec, and it's kind of, if you look at the process list, it's obvious somebody's PS execing into the box. So then I go, oh, I don't like this. I got to change the service name. So we basically got PA exec, which is open source, modified it so we could change the service name on the command line, so we're no longer PSEXE or something else, VM tools or whatever you want to be. And so, it didn't take long to modify the code. And then I was in Seattle a couple weeks ago, and I didn't realize this was already built into PS exec. So, because I used an old version of it, so I was sitting and having lunch with Mark Rosanovich, and I go, yeah, man, I had to modify your tool a little bit with the open source version since you don't release source code, so I could set the service name. He goes, oh, Kevin, I just put that in. So it was already done, and I didn't know it. But, yeah. It's these little things, because when you're attacking networks, one of the things is we like uploading our tools, right? A lot of the AV products detect these tools, so now we have to bypass AV. And a crazy story happened on one of my recent clients. We're working on a pen test for a while, and then I get this urgent call because on one of the domain controllers, there was McAfee detected PY injector. And my client calls me and goes, is this you guys? I go, no, we're not using PY injector. That's not us. It's more on a client-side attack. And so we were really concerned that they were actually compromised at the same time. And then when I started poking around, I downloaded the offending executable, put it in Wireshark, and I looked at it, went to one of our old IP addresses from 3 years ago. So when I pen tested the client 3 years ago, that executable was actually left somewhere. McAfee triggered on it 3 years later. Clue, I'd maybe switch off something from McAfee, switch to a different AV vendor, but in any way, it was kind of like, oh my God, something's wrong. Then taking a look at it, and it's my own code from 3 years ago to going to some old IP address. So that was crazy.
That was funny.
But at least the scary incident was obviously resolved.
So 0 days, huh?
I don't know anything about those.
So when we talk about going the 0-day route, it's an interesting one because when you look at pen testing today, we typically don't go down the route of 0 days, right? Traditionally. I mean, we look for flaws that are already there because what does it benefit a customer to do in order to gain access to them with a 0-day? Can they actually fix that, or can they prevent those type of things?
Well, we actually do, because when we go a little bit further, if a customer is running a network service that happens to be open source, we'll go out if the customer funds it, and we'll look to see if we could exploit it. And we'll actually, and we found in the last, I'd say, year, maybe about 4 0 days, and we actually report it to the client. They're paying us for the work. We report it to them, and it's up to the client to do what they want to do with it. Usually, you think they report it to the vendor. I don't know.
Yeah.
But there, it's actually a work for hire, so technically, I'm not allowed to do anything further with that.
And that's what we have to think about too. I mean, when you're going after web applications, you're going after a completely dynamic application that's custom coded for that company. I mean, you're going after a web application that hasn't been tested before. So you're discovering 0 days in an exposure there already. I mean, traditionally it's going to be SQL injection or something else, right? But at the same time, we have to have those capabilities at our arsenal that we can simulate those attacks, find vulnerabilities, and find and attack them. And that's important because we need to understand the level of risk that we're going after a company in order for them to detect and defend. And this is real world scenarios. Everybody says, well, hey, we're not going to get hit with the 0 day. We're not going to get hit with the 0 day. It's not necessarily true. We've seen a lot of attacks happening over the past, and it's not like the APT China stuff. It's like, hey, they found a SQL injection, flaw on our site, and they used that to pivot into a system, and then they reverse engineered one of our binaries, and they got access into the other systems because we had hard-coded passwords in it, right? Still a 0 day in some way, shape, or form, but different ways of getting into it. And so,
so when we're doing pen testing, usually my clients allow me to really simulate a black hat team going after them. In other words, they don't just say, get domain admin and stop. They want to know exactly how I can compromise the business. And in most cases, once we get privileged, we go after the password store. Because in every business, the passwords are somewhere, all the privileged passwords. Either the administrator's putting an Excel spreadsheet, maybe they're encrypting it, maybe not. Maybe they're using password manager tools like KeyPass.
Oh, wait, raise your hands. How many people have found that Excel spreadsheet with the usernames and passwords in there before, yeah? Wow.
Right.
It's like 90% of the room.
I just tested a major bank. We got in and found on the IT share, which was shared amongst all the IT department, all the credentials for inside, all the credentials for the outside vendor, all the PGP keys, because they use GPG inside, everything unencrypted. It was crazy. But I do have clients that actually buy products. One of them is a commercial password product. I'm not going to mention the name, but companies make mistakes, and this particular company made the mistake of putting their password vault in their VM environment. So of course, once you get domain admin, you compromise the VM environment, you basically clone the machine, offload it, game over. But we actually go further because our clients allowed it. We backdoor stuff. Once we get in, once we get domain admin, usually you can get to all the admin boxes, and we'll backdoor PuTTY to get the credentials. We'll have to post the certificates out to our server in the cloud. We'll backdoor KeePass. We'll backdoor Password Gorilla. In fact, in a recent test, one of the, I believe a database administrator, he used LastPass. And with LastPass, he used two-factor authentication. If you just use LastPass with the master password, you can just put a keylogger on the box, game over, as long as you have system privileges. But I wanted a way to get this guy's passwords on a continuous basis, and the guy used two-factor authentication. My argument is whenever you're using the same device to put in a password in two-factor, and you have privileges over the device, you can never stop an attacker. So I could try demoing what we did with LastPass. With LastPass, it's really easy because in another test that we did, the clients were in a Mac OS X environment. Well, the extension is owned by the user. So any of the extension files you can modify. If you're in the Windows environment, you have access to all the JavaScript and to all the files in the HTML and JavaScript. It's really easy to look at the code. It's not that not so obfuscated. And modify the code to basically steal all the credentials after the person authenticates. So I'll just do a quick demo. Hopefully this will work because I had some caching problem. Is my machine up?
Yep.
So we'll go ahead. Oh, let me explain how it works first. Basically, what we do in this particular case is once the target authenticates with the master password, we're using a mouse over event. When they use the mouse over event, basically we base 64 encode the password and send it over to the machine in the cloud. Then once they authenticate with their two-factor, we basically, in iframes, download the entire vault and scrape the user and password objects off, base 64 encode, send it over to the cloud to our box, right? And it's just so easy, and this is a way, once we get into the network, we pretty much get access to everything. So let's try this LastPass now. I have over here, let me see if I have the VNC connection up. So over here I have burp. Why do I have burp running? Because with LastPass, on their manifest file, they have a certain domains that are built that are allowed, right? LastPass, and there's one called rodan.lastpass, right? It's only unfortunately just HTTPS, so we actually have to install a burp CA cert on the victim's machine. We have to modify their host file to point to rodan.lastpass.com because that seems to be an unused host. So we'll go ahead and use it for our purposes, right? So after the setup's done and after we put our modified JavaScript and modifying a couple HTML files, we're ready to fire it off. So go ahead. Hopefully this will work. I had some issues with caching earlier. Hopefully, always when you do a demo, there's a possibility of failure. Hopefully this won't fail. So go ahead and put in the LastPass password. If I can remember it. Log in. I am having, hold on a second. Let me just clear this. Of course, when you do the demo, it always fails. But wait 1 second. Let's try it again. So over here, I don't know if you could see this text, the master password was sent to this box in the cloud. It's just just base 64 encoded of the credential, which is no big deal because you can put a keylogger in the box. But let's go ahead and authenticate with our two-factor. which is it's just set up with Google Authenticator in this particular case. Oh, of course it changes. Second. And right away, you're not going to see it. In about 15 seconds, I'll show it to you, and it's on a timer, so every 15 seconds, basically scrapes all the username and password objects that are in the iframes, base64 encodes it, and just posts it over to the machine in the cloud. And it keeps running every 15 seconds. That way, if the user changes their credentials, I always get the new ones. So the whole object, the whole reason we're doing this, go back, we should see it pop up it should pop up in about 15, 20 seconds. The reason we do this is because when we're pen testing the client, we actually try to get access to all the privileged passwords in the entire environment. Of course, once you're a domain admin, it's really not that hard. So these are the type of tricks we use, and we go further in our pen testing to be able to leverage this stuff. Now, as you can see, these popped up, and I only have about 6 credentials in here, and we have these fields, data 0, data 1, data 2. Those are each cred. If you want to see what it looks like, if you decode it, one of them, I did this earlier, so I didn't have to cut and paste. Over here, we have the base64 encoded, and we decoded, and the username is tomcaseraleigh@gmail.com. Password is DerbyConRocks. Why Tom Case? That used to be my identity years ago. Anyway, that's a different story. So the whole idea is once you get privileged access, you can get everything. Doesn't matter what password manager the target is using, LastPass, OnePass, doesn't matter if they're using any type of these password managers, especially if they're using commercial ones. If they configure it incorrectly, again, you could get access to the keys to the kingdom. And that's kind of what we do in our adaptive pen testing, is we not only get in, we get access to everything. And that's what the client wants, because that's what they pay us for. Go ahead.
So Kevin's example there was great on how to get credentials from an authentication or elevated permissions, right? What if you're in a tight environment where it's Citrix only? They're in this tight, confined environment where you have access to nothing, and you social engineer a couple people through spear phishing. They click on a link, and you're sitting inside Citrix. What happens then? Well, you own Citrix. That's right. So there's a couple of techniques you can use for post-exploitation and whatnot in order to get elevated permissions. Now, this is one that I found when I was doing a pen test, which was really interesting. I've never ran into something called IBM Communicator. Anybody ever heard of that before? Yeah? So I guess this is probably a 0 day, by the way. Anyways, we'll see. When I went through and I looked at the processes, when you go through an interpreter, for example, and you look through the process, what happens is when you log into your account, you see user accounts that are spawned in the context of your account itself, right? So you can see your name that you social engineered. So let's just say Bob. I got Bob's account. I can see Bob's username inside the process list, which is where it's whited out there. And then you can see the actual path of where it installed at, right? So you can see this, the service path where the executable is at for kicking off the service. Now, when I was going through this, I noticed something really weird. I was like, that's weird. You guys notice here on the bottom, in the middle there, where it says C program files / IBM Communicator, whatever, and there's no name there? Why is there no name there? It's weird. So I'm looking at it, and I'm like, that's strange. So what I did is I just migrated to that process, and I did a process list again, and I was running as a different user. And I'm like, well, that's really weird. So I did a process list again, saw a few more, migrated to that, and I was running as a different user. I'm like, okay, I'll just keep looking. So I kept checking out these credentials and going to different ones, and logged in and had one with local admin rights. Great, easy. Dump the SAM from there, hop into other systems and whatnot. So apparently IBM doesn't protect memory at all. So you can migrate to any user's process space without an issue. As a really limited user account with no access to the rest of the computer. I mean, I'm talking, I was as limited as a possible user you can possibly get. I couldn't even type in a command prompt. It was that limited of a user, right? So you can migrate to that, get access to that, and then from there further compromise. But just looking at things differently, it doesn't mean it's like some highly sophisticated reverse engineered 0 day where I spent 6 months writing an overflow. It's something simple that I noticed that was out of the ordinary. Would you have done that as a pen tester? Would you saw something like that and just said, hey, that doesn't look right, investigate and move forward on it? So that was a fun one that we just did recently. So when we talk about targeting companies and individuals, this is always a good one. Maybe know the whole Jigsaw thing here. There's a Jigsaw module that was released that you can extract, usernames. So basically, this is a Salesforce service, where you can query a company name and it gives you first name, last name, point of contact information, everything. And what they did is they changed their APIs around so you can no longer query those for free, right? And that's fine. But a little weird thing that I saw here. Oh, I need internet here.
Yeah. Feel free.
Thank you.
Yep.
So one thing I noticed is we do in URL, connect.data.com. Oh. How's that? There you go. Thank you.
Remember mine, it wasn't working.
So if you go to in URL, connect.data.com, and then just put in like Apple, for example, the first link here, just click on. And you get all the contact info. So you have first name, last name, what position they're in. So as an attacker, right, what am I going to do? Look at their position.
That's your phishing target list.
That's my phishing target list, right? It's exactly who I'm going to go after in the company. And it's just, it's in Google. It's all good to go. So lock down APIs. Right?
And what's cool is when you're doing phone-based social engineering, now there's a story to this, is several years ago, I don't know, 1 or 2 years ago, Chris Hagnaghi, I don't know if he's in this room, he asked me to do the social engineering capture the flag contest. And I go, that'd be fun. I get to, see if I could, how many points I could score. So he gave me the target company, and then I sat back and thought, well, this is all phone-based social engineering. How am I going to get credibility if if the target wants to verify that I'm a legit party? How can I gain instant credibility? Well, nowadays, everyone goes to Google, right? So in this particular case, the target company that I was supposed to do my CTF for was Microsoft, right? And I'm doing all the preparation for this, and I'm about to do the CTF the next day. Then I'm a little bit worried because I'm kind of familiar with the law because I had some dealings with them in the past. And here I'd be calling them, getting information like their internal numbers and maybe leveraging that to get some other piece of information. And there's a statute on the books called the wire fraud statute. And basically, if you make an interstate phone call and you obtain someone's property or money under false pretenses, it's a federal offense. And the courts have ruled proprietary information of a company is actually their property. So I call up, use social engineering using an interstate device, and I get private information of the company. It's a federal felony where you can get up to 30 years in federal prison. I really didn't want to go back. So I was thinking about this, so we went down to the EFF and asked them. I go, is this really cool for me to do? Can I get into any trouble whatsoever? Because how I'm familiar with the law, I think it's kind of a gray area, and I don't want to be in that gray area. And the EFF says, we can't give you legal advice. But wait a second. I thought, you vetted the conference, you vetted this, and no, we can't give you legal advice. You have to go to your lawyer. So I call up my lawyer. I'm in the room with a bunch of friends over at whatever hotel it was, and I call my lawyer up and I run down the whole story. And I just hear silence for 10 seconds, and he goes, are you fucking crazy? You don't think that the lawyers at Microsoft will now come after Kevin Mitnick for exposing their information publicly? You're not doing it. So I was kind of bummed, right? And I set up all the verification tools. And one of these tools that you might be able to use if you're ever doing phone-based social engineering attacks is called List Yourself. But let me show you, what I set up already. So if you type in my phone number, which is my cell phone number, which is on my business card, no big secret, you type in Microsoft, and I'm Microsoft in Las Vegas. That's me. So people look for Microsoft in Las Vegas to get my cell. It is annoying, because I get a lot of questions about Xbox support.
Speaking of which,
then I give them the number to Apple. But anyway.
Speaking of which, can you help me out with some Xbox stuff later on?
Sure.
Thanks.
So how do you do this? How can you take any company name in the world, any government agency in the world, and push it out? Simple. Listyourself.net. Just use listyourself.net. You can put in whatever company name you want. You could set up a VoIP number to point to a burner phone. It doesn't matter. And now you're that company and you have that credibility. It's super easy. And I've used this, and actually when we're allowed to do social engineering and scope with companies, I actually become part of the company. And it works like, they ask me, well, who do you work for again? Or there's any hesitation? Oh, just go to Google. Go to Google. Google this phone number, Google the company name. Comes up, hundreds of responses. Hey, it works. So you might want to use that tool yourself, listyourself.net.
Now, we're going to do a quick demo here. And so we need some audience participation. And we're running low on time here, so we're going to need to make it quick. Does anybody want to come up on stage? And I'm going to preface this with you have to give a verbal yes, you're going to do this. And we're going to just grab your name, your full name, general location where you're at, and then we're going to pull your social security number, okay? So we're not going to put it up on the screen or anything like that, but you can confirm it. Does anybody here want to go ahead and do that? All right, you, sir, go on it. You don't have like, I know your name, you're good. No, Bob Smith's. That's a rough one.
Well, then I got logged in.
So you give us verbal permission to look up your information and all that other good stuff and yada, yada, yada? Sure. It's not going to be up on the screen.
All right, great. So you don't mind if I put it up? No.
Oh,
so,
no.
So
no, don't put a social security number.
Oh, no, okay.
Yeah.
So basically, there's a lot of databases out there that anybody can subscribe to. Usually they're for private investigators. In Colorado, you don't need a PI license, by the way, so you can become one without going through any licensing requirements. But if you're in a legitimate business like security, they'll vet you. They'll give you access. It's relatively cheap, and for 25 cents to 50 cents, you can get anybody's social, anyone's date of birth, their addresses, their cell phone numbers. So you can imagine what an attacker can do with this. For example, now this would be out of scope of a pen test, of course, but what an attacker could do is if they get the social, the date of birth, I'll show you how to get somebody's mother's maiden name. It's quite easy. You get all this information, then you go over to freeannualcreditreport.com, right? You have all the information. It'll come up with a multiple.
Still mad at you by that.
What?
Still mad at you with that.
Don't tell. So, go to freeannualcreditreport.com, put in the information. It'll come up with a 3-question multiple choice. Those questions are easy to bypass, right? They'll ask, well, what city do you, what county do you live in? Well, that's really hard to figure out when you have the target's address, right? What's your phone number? Usually you give 5 choices. Well, you have an unlimited amount of time to go Google that, and that's available in the database. Sometimes they'll ask questions that you don't know the answer. Usually if you answer none of the above, it works, right? And then you get the target's credit report. Now, once you have that, you know, any of the services they have at Amazon, Apple that use payment cards as a way to authenticate, now you could reset everything, right? So it's really scary how easy it is for an attacker to do this. So go ahead and tell the story, Dave.
So Kevin calls me up on the phone, and whenever he calls me up, whenever he's got something new or something he wants to try, he's like so excited. He's like, Dave, he's like, hey, can I get permission to get your credit report? And I'm like, wait, what? And I'm like, bro, listen, we're good friends and everything. I'm like, all right, whatever, go ahead. I'm like, whatever. So I give him a report, and like literally like 10 minutes later, he calls me up. He's like, man, you got a really good credit rating. I'm like, yeah, right. He's like, oh no, you got this out, you got this out, you got this out. This is your credit here. I'm like, you son of a.
How did you get that 800, man?
It was good. It was good.
So we'll go ahead and run Greg over here. Is this on the screen? I can't.
No, it's not on the screen.
We're going to wait. Okay.
We're just going to have him confirm that it's on there. This isn't a plant in the audience. We don't have Copperfield coming on, flying around the stage or anything. Not yet. That's later on. That'd be awesome. That'd be sweet if, like, intro ceremonies, Copperfield just starts flying around the stage. Next year, mental note.
So, Greg, so is this your valid social? Full social right here?
Yes.
DOB?
Yes.
Address? I don't know if that's your current, but we could search on your social.
The first one is a current address, and the second one's a rental I own.
Okay. Good to
All right,
know.
next for your credit report?
Well, no, that's not the credit report.
I was just kidding.
No. So, any of these phone numbers here related to you in any way?
Yes. Those are my phone numbers, too.
So basically with the PI databases, that, again, you just have to, you'll be vetted, but it's not hard. And, of course, you want to use this for legitimate purposes only. But this is great in social engineering attacks when you're testing clients, because I had one client, huge, it must have been about 50,000 employees. They had a password reset page, right? And how you authenticated was the last 4 of your social. To reset your password. I reset the domain admin's password and got in, right? So thank you. All right. I guess we couldn't show it. I'm sorry, right? Let me show one other thing. I'll show you one other thing, though, that I can show. I'll just run it on myself. All right, so this is kind of cool to get mother's maiden names.
So can I put it on? You got the other one closed out, just making sure.
Oh, hold on. Hold on, let me authenticate first. Wait, make sure.
Last thing I want, man.
Okay.
Are you good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Are you on?
So here's a site called Vital Search. And what's cool is there's some states that have open birth records. Open death, open birth. So they sell this information, right? It's available, it used to be able to buy them off eBay and CDs. So you can, in many, California, Texas, Kentucky. Wait, Kentucky's actually on the list too. So what you can do is you can get a target's mother's maiden name, which again is used for, obviously as password reset questions, questions and answers. So we'll go ahead. We'll do first, who's the guy that played Frank Abagnale in Catch Me If You Can? DiCaprio, okay, let's look for him. So DiCaprio here. And then Leonardo. Let's go ahead and search on him. There we go. So if you can see down here, Leonardo DiCaprio, his birth date is 11/11/74. His mother's name is Indeber. So this works. California, Kentucky, Texas. There are certain states that have open birth records. California's a great one, right? And so now you get the target's mother's maiden name. You could leverage that to get access to information.
Oh yeah, it looks like it. It's all SQL queries. It's all SQL queries. I was looking at it, I'm like, that's a straight SQL query.
Oh yeah, I saw that too. It's tempting.
It's like, boom.
But I paid the $60. Right. $60 is cheaper than 1 hour of lawyer time. Much cheaper.
So wrapping things up here, when we talk about pen testing, and what I recommend as far as references is the penetration testing execution standard is an excellent resource to kind of get your mind framed around how you think. And there's a lot of the founders in here. We're making updates now, so we're going to be coming out with different releases here soon. Nickerson's here, Ian's here, a lot of the people that helped kick it off. Great way of thinking. But really, we have to get away from going down the automated scanner routes, which is just pushing things out, looking at things, and then slapping a bunch of vulnerabilities out. It doesn't do us any good. We have to focus on understanding how we think as attackers in order to really start to protect ourselves and defend against it. And that's adaptive pen testing.
Right. You want me to tell the Mitnick story real quick?
Oh yeah, that's last one.
Oh.
Last one.
So I have a client, and they're a fantastic client. I worked with them on a couple of occasions, and they hired us to do obviously a pen test. But before and later on, they brought me in to do a keynote on social engineering. So I kind of showed the hacker's playbook. I showed SET. I showed a bunch of things. And then they decided, oh, okay, now that you showed us all this stuff, we want you to try to see if you could use social engineering to target our network, right? And I go, okay, just make sure you don't tell anybody, right? Because I already did a keynote, so I certainly don't want you to tell anybody, because then it obviously will ruin the results of the test. So basically, we tried a few attacks we did against IT, and they failed. A couple of executives, they failed. But then we learned that this company recently brought in a very well-known speaker to present at their company. And so I thought, well, let's find out who hired that person. So find out who hired the person, found out where that speaker was represented, because you have different speaker agencies. And then then we just figured, we'll just go after like accounting, human resources, because they're usually an easier target. So we sent a spreadsheet, expenses, right, for the recent speaker that they had. And of course, this was a very old school attack. Basically, when you open the spreadsheet, you don't see any numbers, but in the email it says, if you don't see the numbers, just go ahead and click Enable Macros, right? Very easy, simple attack. Basically, got into this person's machine, did the one-pass trick. This was able to backdoor one-pass the same way we did last pass, got the credentials for that machine. Then I was able to log in. They used a product inside the company where they would chat with other departments. So I could see from this person's machine, I could log in and see what IT's doing, I could see what accounting's doing, I could see what development's doing, and I'm sitting there watching for months. Yeah, and then, of course, they had a search function, so I searched on the name Mitnick because they didn't tell anybody that I was pen testing, and there's all this information about me, and I go, oh my God, so people do know. And, their cars would drive in the parking lot, immediately go, maybe that's Mitnick's team. They were really paranoid, right? It was kind of funny. We always were thinking, how can we remotely increase the paranoia for fun, but we didn't want to waste their money. Right? So we're just weighing in late, where we're looking at all the operations. We learn more about what the problems are of this particular company, who's communicating with who, because that would help us leverage a better attack. to get to a developer who had more privileges in the company. So it was funny because some of the first attacks failed, and so a lot of people thought, oh, that was stupid attack. That was like, so imbecile attack. So they gave me the nickname Mittens. And what in the Mittens was they'd have this picture of this, like a cross, and it'd be this guy wearing mittens like you can't type on the computer, right? So, so we're kind of laughing, oh, that's a cute nickname. So eventually we pwned the company, right? And then later on in the test, we find a web application vulnerability, and we were able to upload our own PHP code to the web server root, and we named it mittens.php. So the client calls me, goes, or emails or calls, he goes, are you pen testing right now? Because there's this file called mittens.php. Is this you guys? Who else is it going to be? Right? So it was kind of funny because by doing the surveillance, you kind of, and this is over a long period of time, you look at the operations, it was kind of interesting to watch the conversations, particularly about what we're doing in our pen test and where they were trying to predict our next move. So it was kind of like a fun chess game, and it was really enjoyable, but it was quite funny and entertaining. And I think, anyway, so a lot of these tests, are sometimes fun and entertaining and not just boring work, right?
Well, it's funny because every time I call Kevin now, I'm just like, hey, Mittens, what's up, man?
Yeah.
Or text message Mittens, I taunt him now with Mittens. But last thing we're going to show here is just more of that adaptive pen testing stuff. And this is something that I walk into DerbyCon, right? And Chris Nickerson is happy to see me. I'm happy to see him. And he's like, dude, you got to come here. You got to check this out. You got to check this out. This might actually work. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he comes over. He's like, dude, check this out. Check this out. He's like, so there's these double doors, and they're locked and everything. I just want to show you what happens. And it's funny. I'll tell you the whole story what happens afterwards. But Chris gets all the credit for this because he's
special thanks to Chris Nickerson because he's the one that came up with this crazy concoction. But you can see here, doors locked. Motion sensor on top
Are you
here.
sure Copperfield insurance?
Could be Copperfield.
Okay. This is all.
That doesn't look weird.
That's awesome.
A look from the other side. Hey, round of applause for Chris right there. That's Chris. So the funny part is when we go in there, there's two staff there, and all they see is this big plume of smoke, and I walk in, I'm like, like if you don't move, they're not going to notice you're there. It's like, the smoke is covering me, so, I'm just, sorry about that, can't even imagine what the other side looked like, but thank you so much for having us and hearing Chris talk, and check out all the rest of what we have at DerbyCon. Thank you.